thank everybody for joining us today. As you know, California has some of the highest property tax values in the country. And in adjunct to that, we pay lots and lots of money in property taxes. And there's one organization that back in the 1970s actually helped make home ownership affordable and business ownership affordable by way of passage of Prop 13. That organization is the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and very pleased to welcome my friend Jon Coupal. He's been on the show a number of times. We've had him come speak. Actually, we had a seminar on this subject a couple of years ago because we thought they were going to pull the trigger on this Prop 13 split roll a few years ago, but they waited until this election cycle. Jon is the president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. It's the largest taxpayer association in California with a membership of around 200,000 people. And from 91 to 98, he served as Director of Legal Affairs for HJTA. He's a recognized expert in California fiscal affairs, and he's a lawyer. Graduate of the School of Law at College of William and Mary, and he also worked with the Pacific Legal Foundation, another favorite organization of mine. Between these two, they're the last line of defense in California against regulations and taxes. And with that, again, we will ask for, or I'll open this up for questions a little bit later. And there's a button down below on a tab on your Zoom screen called reactions, and we'll see a thumb up, and some other people are going to be helping me. Amanda and Brett and Tab will help me if I miss the thumbs up. Jon Coupal, welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Well, Andy, it's always a pleasure. I enjoy being on your show. I enjoy even better coming down to the Central Coast. You know, I try to come down to the Central Coast and hit Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, San Luis Obispo, try to hit all communities in one trip. And there's a nasty rumor that the real reason I do that is because of the fine wines down there. But I'll just leave that alone. So anyway, it's always great to have so many friends down in the Central Coast that I'm sorry we can't, I haven't been able to come down. But I guess this is the second best thing.
Well, we'll be sending you a bottle of wine at least as a thank you, and to tease you to come back soon.
Okay. Well, it's.
So Jon, would you give us a little bit of the history of how bad was it in California that prompted the passage of the original Prop 13?
Sure. Well, it was late 60s, early 70s. California was beginning to experience extraordinary economic growth. This is just a follow-on after World War II. And of course, what also was going on was a lot of defense spending. And so your property taxes are based on both the value of your property and the tax rate. And what was happening in California in the early 70s was high tax rates. The average property tax rate was 2.6%, but also very rapidly increasing real estate values, particularly in the LA area and also in the Bay Area. And these two factors combined to start forcing people out of their homes who wanted to keep their homes. So Howard Jarvis, people don't realize this, but Howard Jarvis tried a number of times to get property tax relief. I think he tried 6 different times and failed, but in a testament to his tenacity, he kept plugging away. And in June of 1978, the stars were in alignment. Tax bills had just gone out from many county assessors and tax collectors, and people were outraged to see their property taxes quadruple or triple in 1 year. So despite the fact that every single major institution, whether a labor organization, even big business, the Chamber of Commerce opposed Prop 13, It received virtually no editorial support. So every labor education editorial boards opposed Prop 13. However, it passed by 66%. And what that tells us is that there are times when the political establishment is completely out of touch with where the people are. And that certainly happened in 1978, and it happened more recently with the rise of the Tea Party movement. And whatever you think about Donald Trump, leading into that, there is a view that our political elites are out of touch with the common person, and so you have these tax revolts. And I smell a little bit of a tax revolt occurring right now. In fact, it may have already occurred, at least started. As you recall, last March, it was called Prop 13, but it had nothing to do with the original Prop 13. This was the statewide school bond, and it was $15 billion. Now, school bonds at the state level do not come with a tax increase. This was just assuming debt. And yet, for the first time since the mid-'80s, California voters rejected a statewide school bond. And that's not because Californians are anti-education. I had very progressive individuals tell me that they support education, they support the teachers, but we're not getting value for our dollar. So as we're looking at the November election, this is going to be a common theme that we're going to be pushing, not just with the split roll proposal, but with any tax increase. And that is, we're asking the voters of the state of California, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, progressive, conservative, do you believe right now you're getting good value for your tax dollars? And I would venture to say about 90% of Californians think they are not getting that kind of value.
Okay, could you explain, Prop 15 is what's called a split roll. Could you inform our audience how they're splitting that baby?
Sure. Split roll simply refers to treating different classes of property differently for tax purposes. California has had what we call a unified tax roll, meaning that all property is treated the same. That's been the rule in California since the 1800s. Prop 13 did not create a loophole for California businesses. We've had a unified roll. Now, other states do have split rolls, and it's not necessarily commercial versus residential. Sometimes they split all these kinds of weird categories of property, taxing golf courses at a different rate or parking garages, different industrial versus retail. But in California, I think wisely, our California Constitution has said that all property will be taxed the same rate. Prop 13 came in and said all property will be taxed at the same rate, except that rate, instead of being an average of 2.6%, is now going to be 1%. That is your core property tax in the state of California, is that 1% tax rate, which, it cut California property taxes by half. So people assume that California has low property taxes, but we really don't. In reality, California ranks 17th out of 50 states in per capita property tax collections. So we are definitely in the top half of the amount of property taxes we collect. Having said that, Prop 13 has worked very well in limiting the increases in taxes year over year, and that's particularly important for homeowners, but also for businesses. Now, what this Prop 15 would do is it would split the roll, and it would still keep the 1% tax rate for all property, but it would change the rules of Prop 13, which say that the taxable value can only go up 2% a year. It would remove that protection for commercial property. So the net effect is, what's the bottom line here? What is the bottom line? Bottom line here is that it would be a $12 billion a year property tax hike, specifically on business and commercial and industrial property, but all the costs associated by business owners would be passed along to consumers. Also, one thing that you will hear is that this is going to just make Disney Corporation, make them pay their fair share, Chevron Corporation. What they won't be talking about is small business. And this is very crucial. Most small businesses rent their space, and those leases are typically what we call triple net leases, which means that the tax liability that's put on the landlord flows immediately to the tenant. So we're not talking about Chevron Corporation here. We're talking about Manny's Muffler Shop or Susie's Alterations. These are the kinds of small mom and pops that are going to be slammed by split roll, which is why NFIB opposes this. And we can talk about ag too, and I'm sure that's big in your area. But Prop 15, bottom line, $12 billion a year property tax increase.
Well, one question that I get asked over and over and over again as we dive into the details of this is what percentage of the voters is required for approval?
It is simple majority vote. Now, it takes more signatures to qualify a proposed constitutional amendment, and they qualified this. I think they gathered almost 1.7 million signatures for this. They did it in a very deceptive way. They did it by putting a banner on the tables where they were gathering signatures that said, "Protect Prop 13, sign here." So they were very, very deceptive in the manner in which they collected signatures. So they got the signatures, but having qualified for the ballot, it will just take a simple majority vote.
Okay, so you mentioned the three sectors are commercial, retail, and industrial properties. My understanding is farmland will not be involved, but for instance, a winery, a vegetable cooler, processing plant on ag land will be considered either commercial or industrial.
That is correct. I think the proponents of split roll thought that they would buy some peace with the ag community by saying that ag land would not be considered commercial. But I think the proponents of this, which are your typical lefty taxing spend liberals, did not realize that ag is a whole lot more than land. Ag is the packing facilities, the wineries, the infrastructure, the storage facilities. All those things are part of ag, and this is why the California Farm Bureau Federation opposes it vigorously. And also the Wine Institute of California has come out very much opposed because they started doing the math. All you have to do if you want a business and you're trying to figure out what the impact is, look or try to estimate what the current value of your property is and apply a 1% tax rate on that. If you've owned your property for a long period of time, that's going to double or triple your property taxes. So the impact on wineries, on packing facilities, even just farmers with their storage facilities and processing capabilities are going to take a huge hit.
Okay, from discussions with you and a few other people, it seems that their strategy here is to divide and conquer, to create a class envy attack against big corporations getting unfair tax breaks and try to get people that don't own property, or at least don't own business property, to vote to take money away from those people, and vis-a-vis the divide and conquer mentality. And then what I've been told in no uncertain terms is if they can slay the business community, they'll come back for the residential and there'll be nobody to finance the campaign against the measure.
I think that's true. I think they have a three-step process. They're coming after commercial and industrial property first. Now they have excluded income-producing residential properties, which includes apartments, basically apartments. they've excluded those, but there's some ambiguities there that we can talk about in a moment. But so they're political, and they've admitted this, coming after commercial, industrial first, then coming after apartments, income producing residential properties, which are commercial when you get right down to it. Apartments are a commercial enterprise. And then finally coming after single family residential homes. So they have, and they've announced this publicly, that this is going to be a 3-step process for them to eventually dismantle Proposition 13 in its entirety. So our members understand that. So our members, 200,000 members, I think people know that most of our members are homeowners. We do have owners of small unit apartments, like somebody owns a 4-plex or duplex. We have many of those members as well. And they understand that if we lose this fight on Prop 13, that homeowners will be next. And then at the core of it, even before that, just out of self-interest, what happens when businesses have to pay more in taxes? Who makes up that difference? So businesses will either have to reduce their employment, will have to charge their customers more, which is typical. And by the way, when they charge their customers more, that exacerbates one of California's worst problems, which is the cost of living. California has an extraordinarily high cost of living, which means people are moving out. California will actually lose population this year because of our hostile tax and regulatory climate. So our members understand that the impact for homeowners is twofold. Number one, increased cost of services and goods. Number two, we're going to be next. The phrase I like to use, the quote from Benjamin Franklin is, we either hang together or we either hang separately. And the business community has been working closely with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association to coordinate our campaigns in slightly different ways. Obviously, they're reaching out to their corporate members, and we're reaching out to small businesses and homeowners. And but we're working in shoulder to shoulder with the business community on this effort.
So John, one of the ways I've characterized this in terms of there's never a good time for a tax increase, but this would have to be one of the worst, is brick and mortar buildings are already suffering vis-a-vis the competition against the internet. Secondly, then we had the COVID shutdown, which means they're not getting any income coming in whatsoever. Has there been any indication that some of the powers that be are realizing this could actually cause a collapse in commercial real estate values because it's the last straw on the back of the camel?
Well, even if we didn't have COVID, just assume that things were totally normal and that China did not release this virus on the world, okay? So let's assume that we were still in economic recovery and that things were going great. If this passed, the tax liability for commercial property is obviously increased, and tax liability is capitalized into the purchase price. So whenever you increase the cost of buying or retaining property, it decreases the value. That's economics 101. So even without COVID, this would reduce the value of property in California. A stark example of this is like with Melrose taxes. You have two houses side by side, and one's got a Melrose tax and one doesn't, and they're identical. Well, a prospective home buyer is going to buy the house that doesn't have the Melrose because they can make that economic calculation that I'm going to be paying higher taxes over there. The same thing is true with respect to commercial property. So, it will definitely decrease the value of property. But here's the other thing. With COVID, Andy, this is very interesting. There is this big experiment going on right now in America. It's called working from home. Many companies are discovering that their employees are just as productive working from home as they are in the office. What is this going to happen to the demand for office space? Office space is a huge segment of the commercial properties universe. So, for example, the owners of the building that I'm in right now in downtown Sacramento, 2 blocks from the Capitol, very few people are in this building. Everybody's working from home. All my legal team is working from home right now. And amazingly, it's working out fairly well. And what's really odd, Andy, you may know Tim Biddle, our Director of Legal Affairs, who a couple weeks ago, he actually argued a case before the California Supreme Court from his living room. I mean, last year, we never would have envisioned this kind of demographic, this kind of sea change in the way California or the nation is operating. And this is going to have a dramatic effect on real estate values, land use, that we haven't begun to figure out. Bottom line, in this time of real estate uncertainty, would be the last time you want to increase taxes on commercial property.
Okay, I only have a few more questions or points, and then we can open it up to questions from our audience. I'm already getting solicitations as the director of CoLab from different firms that do these campaigns as a business model. I've always looked to Howard Jarvis as the number one, the point of the spear for defending Prop 13. How do you work with those various campaigns out there in terms of if people are being asked to donate to help defeat Prop 15, which is what we're talking about? Prop 15 is the split roll of the original Prop 13. Should they donate directly to Howard Jarvis, or should they and then how do they or should they be giving money to these people that are soliciting?
Well, first of all, I think because we've been around for 40 years and we've had a remarkable success on initiatives with like Prop 218, the Right to Vote on Taxes Act, I think people are generally pretty comfortable contributing to the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Who they would contribute to we have a separate initiative committee under state law. Our regular association and our foundation cannot engage in this kind of election politics. So we have had what's called an initiative committee. We've had it for 40 years. It's called Protect Prop 13, a project of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. The technical name, because we have to comply with FPPC rules, is Protect Proposition 13, No on 15, a project of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. However, don't feel you have to write out the whole thing. If you just did Protect Prop 13 and contributed to us, it would get to the right place. And that leads me to explain how we intend to use our initiative committee money. The best model for Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association as a grassroots organization is radio. I happen to know a few people who are on radio. I think one of them is right here, right next to me in that box, right next to me. Radio is a great medium for grassroots direct contact, and you get so much value for the dollar. There is another committee that's run by the major business groups, the California Chamber of Commerce, the California Business Roundtable, the California Business Properties Association. They have their own committee. It's not permanent. It's called the Californians to Stop Higher Property Taxes. They are legitimate too. And I sit on their meetings. In fact, we're having a meeting at 3 o'clock today via Zoom on that main committee. But we are working with them to coordinate to make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes. They have ceded to us the airwaves on radio. They will have more funding than we will for television and direct mail and micro-targeting. I'm getting into the weeds here, and I apologize if this is too insider baseball.
No, because John, you're not, because, most of these people that are on the Zoom call are already getting our mailings or emails. So and I've already written editorials and done shows with you on this going back a couple of years. But one of the things we build this is how do we defeat it? And we've been talking about what it is. Now we need to talk about how to defeat it. And one of the things that I've talked with my members of CoLab and my audience, radio audience over the years, is the most direct thing employers and landlords can do is simply talk to their employees and tenants and explain to them that this is, if it's employees, that there will be this much less money available for this company to survive this shutdown. There will be this much less money for benefits or this, that, or the other, or perks or raises or COLAs. And to go to the tenants and tell them that if this thing passes, your rent is going to go up to X number of dollars a month. And I wish if we could just do that simple grassroots. What I've always argued is we have a captive audience by virtue of employees and tenants. And to me, that's the best grassroots way. But again, getting people's attention on something like this can be very difficult. And then plus people think, hey, I don't want to politic at work or what have you. But I think we have to get into survival mode here because of, as you mentioned, the COVID shutdown, the lockdown, and the commute from the people telecommuting.
Yeah, I think there's a good way to do it. I think tenants and tenants and small businesses who rent will probably, and employees would probably react negatively if their bosses or landlords told them how to vote. But you don't have to do that. You just have to explain, look, there's this thing on the ballot. I'm not telling you how to vote, but here's the stark reality of my costs and what I have to do in reaction if this thing passes. And that's entirely legitimate. And we've seen that work quite a few times. We were able to defeat a partial tax here in the city of Sacramento that was on apartments. A lot of the landlords just simply told their tenants, if this partial tax gets passed, I'm going to have to raise rents. That's all there is to it. I want to, before we open up to questions, I do want to anticipate one question of how does it look? We don't know what voter turnout is going to look like in November. It could be, quite frankly, I think that Joe Biden doesn't excite a lot of Democrats. They will still vote overwhelmingly for whoever the Democrat candidate is. But there are a lot of issues on the ballot that excites the conservative side, things like rent control, affirmative action is now on the ballot, and of course this is a direct assault on Proposition 13. So I think we have the opportunity to really energize our base, and plus the polling in favor of split roll is not particularly strong. In fact, I think it's pretty weak. Don't get overconfident because of that. Trust me. This is California. It's a progressive state. I'm still nervous, but looking at those polling numbers, if we execute a good campaign, we will defeat this thing. We are anticipating a deceptive title and summary from the Attorney General. The Attorney General will release a title and summary on a week from today, on July 21st. We sent the Attorney General several months ago a 4-page letter explaining why the title and summary that he had put on the petitions, not on the ballot material, but when they were circulating the petitions, it was a very deceptive title and summary. We made it clear to him that if he transposed that title and summary or didn't substantially change it for the ballot material, that we would sue him. And by the way, he has gotten a lot of criticism from even some liberal publications for manipulating the title and summary process. So he is on notice. Is what the proponents will say, but you have to read it very carefully. It's $3 million of total property ownership by the owner. So if there's one small building, another small building, and another small commercial building, pretty soon you're up to $3 million pretty quick. And then plus what's not defined is what if somebody owns, say a couple owns one strip mall, they own a second strip mall, but then they own a partial interest using a partnership with other people, a third strip mall. How do they calculate out the ownership for purposes of that $3 million threshold? That is not explained. The legislature is going to have to deal with this. And speaking of the ambiguities and the complexities, we are heartened by the fact that the California Assessors Association, as an organization, has come out officially opposed to Prop 15. That is very unusual. The Assessors Association is non-political. They rarely take a position on any ballot measure. And we knew that we had several assessors who were individually opposed to split roll, but we were kind of surprised and just wonderfully, pleasantly surprised that the assessors as an organization on their letterhead wrote an op-ed saying, we oppose this because it's impossible to implement. Larry Stone, who is the assessor of Santa Clara County, who hates Prop 13, he hates Prop 13, but he hates this initiative even more. He has told the Chronicle and other news outlets that it's not just difficult to implement, it's impossible. So now we're turning it over to the legislature. How are we going to implement this thing? And one of the complexities is that what counts for that $3 million threshold? We think that $3 million threshold is really a totally fake threshold. Prop 13 does provide extraordinary stability. And your point about the increase in real estate values is true. In fact, the amount of property tax generated year over year exceeds inflation and population in California every year for the last 40 years. If there may be one year where it was slightly below, that was 2005 after the 2004 bust. But almost every year, property revenues exceeded inflation and cost of living. So this notion that we somehow starved local government is a joke. As I said earlier, we ranked 17th out of 50 states in per capita property tax collections. And what is the other thing that we hear all the time? How Prop 13 decimated California education. Well, here's a little factoid. We are now today spending 30% more on a per student inflation adjusted basis than we were just prior to Prop 13 in 1975, a time when the schools were great, good administration, good facilities, good after school programs. We're spending 30% more in constant dollars than we were back then. And yet look at the education product that is being given to us. It is subpar, but the cause has nothing to do with money.
Hey, John, let me interject something before we go. I think to Charles McLaughlin was next on a question. And that is after Prop 13 was passed, to quote unquote make themselves whole, they started charging fees for everything. My most famous example is if you want to build a 7-Eleven in Nolita, the traffic fee alone is $700,000 just for the traffic fee. So are they going to collect all the property taxes and all the fees? I'm wondering, are they going to be able to make a dent in pensions if they succeed?
Well, I think you just said the P word, pensions. What I'm telling people is that every proposed tax increase at the state or local level, no matter what they say, whether it's for transportation, schools, open space, the bottom line is what they really need it for and where the money will end up is to shore up the unfunded pension obligations in both the PERS and the teachers' retirement system and also your local county retirement systems. The pension systems are upside down and they will say we need more police protection, but the reality is that money will be plowed right into pension. So, and direct answer to your question, no, they're not going to get rid of any fees. I mean, they're never going to, you would have the chances of reducing a tax or fee in California, you'd have better luck trying to get a sirloin steak out of the mouth of a Doberman. It's just not going to happen.
Would an orchard be considered an improvement like a winery, cooler, or packing house?
Well, it wouldn't be the land. It would have to be considered an improvement. And I do know that there is a way that they tax it. Yeah. Same is true with oil in the ground. That's why the tax and spend lobby want to impose an extraction tax on petroleum. That's on the land, but that could still be taxed.
Here's the question. Do you believe that the orchard would be subject to the split roll tax?
As part of our grassroots campaign, we're going to do something that the Business Coalition is not doing, and that is we are producing lawn signs, and we're setting up distribution points now. So if you can watch this space, go to our website, or you can send an email to Deborah, DEBRA, @hjta.org, and just let her know that you want to be on that distribution list for the lawn signs.
Okay, we need, again, folks, if you'd like to ask Jon some direct questions, go to, at the bottom of your page, it says reactions, and just click the thumbs up sign there.
And so sometimes it's difficult to get meetings, but we will get meetings with all the major ones. We'll go in there. We have a coordinator who will set up all those meetings with every major newspaper in California. And we'll go in. I'm sure there'll be a representative from NFIB and the ag community, and also NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Latino Coalition. Our coalition is extremely broad because we have informed people to the extent that they understand what the risks are.
And so we need both. We need the taxpayers here locally. I'm not sure if Andrea Seastrand from the Central Coast Taxpayers is with us today, but we need to prop this up locally and statewide with your support.
Absolutely. If you look at what the LA Unified School District is saying, they're saying not only are we not coming back to school, but we're demanding, and they've already, the governor's already acceded to full pay, full benefits, even if they don't come back to work. And they're also demanding that all charter schools be shut down. I mean, they are overreaching like nobody's business. Charter schools are popular in the state of California. And what the LA Unified School District is doing is nothing short of extortion. Bottom line is people are getting very angry when we're seeing this overly aggressive behavior on the part of public employee unions. So yes, we will be pointing to these things about how you're paying for this and you're not getting it. We're paying for prisons and they're letting people out. These are the kind of messages I think that resonate very strongly. The apartment community is very well organized. I'll be speaking on rent control before the Apartment Owners of America. They're having a conference coming up, I think in September. Haven't decided whether or not that's going to be live or via Zoom. More and more, everything looks like it's going to be Zoom. But also, of course, people remember that Howard Jarvis was the executive director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, also known as AGLA. Plus, we have the California Apartment Association. So a lot of the apartment owners, I was pleasantly surprised the extent to which they beat Prop 10 last time. That wasn't just a beating, that was a pretty bad thrashing. So why they've come back with Prop 21, I don't know. I think, again, maybe they're hoping for a good voter turnout, a good, strong, progressive voter turnout. But yes, these are our top priorities. Prop 15, 19, and 21. 21 is the rent control, and 15 is the split roll. So that we'll be spending a lot of time talking about each and every one of these. Of course, Prop 15 is the one that's the direct existential threat to Prop 13. The teachers need to be very careful about using any school resources or time to engage in political advocacy. We have sued school districts in the past for crossing that line. It is a principle of the United States Constitution that public monies cannot be used for political advocacy. That is just clear. And to be seen. I am not a party person. I don't get involved in party politics. A third of our members are Democrats. They tend to be very, very conservative Democrats. But I will say I was a bit disappointed with the GOP in not coming out and opposing the statewide school bond last March. You have to talk to the party leaders about that. Our focus will be on 15. We're going to produce some of our lawn signs will say no on 15, no on 19. It's a combined effort. So we've got a smaller campaign to fight 19 as well as 15. Again, split roll is our number one priority, but 19 is just horrible, and the portability. So what they did is they substantially repeal the ability to pass on property to your kids or grandchildren without triggering reassessment. That was scored by the legislative analysts as being about $1 billion a year, a property tax hike. And I had meetings with the realtors. I told them that there was no way we could ever support $1 billion property tax increase. So I signed the ballot argument against 19, but also Ken Cooley, who is a Democrat legislator up here, spoke against it, and he signed the ballot argument with me. And so there's going to be a broad-based coalition against it. No on rent control, no on split roll, no on bigger government. Well, the point of voting is to make sure you give them 12 successive defeats in a row.
Okay.
Now, thankfully, though, to the point of Prop 15/13, that's in the Constitution. So they will always have to go back to the people to change that one. And so this is not one of those cases where we're going to work really hard to defeat this and then they're going to turn around and pass it. They can't, because it has to be, it can only be amended by the people. Is that correct, John?
Yes, that is. But you also raised an interesting point about defeating it. I would like not to just defeat it. I would like to crush this thing.
The fact that if we see an economic collapse in the price of real estate because of the perfect storm of brick and mortar versus internet, the shutdown, and people starting to commute, work from home, do they not realize what could happen? And then plus the teachers, teachers as schools get 40% of property taxes. They may end up with less by being greedy. And we will be listing the propositions, and we'll probably do a video on that as well, walking people through the pros and cons. They purposely make these so confusing. The ads are completely deceptive, and we're in a sad state of affairs. So we need people like you that have taken the time today to get this education and to learn this information, to go out and talk to your organizations, your neighbors, and everything else. We've got to win these things by grassroots because we're going to be seriously outgunned. Good, and we'll be putting these propositions. We put a lot of stuff on our website. We also have a Facebook page. We have our own YouTube channel. So we'll be promoting all of these videos and try to educate people. And then plus the Andy Caldwell show. Some of you may not know, it's now being broadcast in San Luis Obispo County on 98.5 FM. So it gets most of San Luis Obispo County, in 1440 in Santa Maria, and 1290 in Santa Barbara. So pretty much reaches from Malibu to Paso Robles, except for some coastal areas of San Luis Obispo County. And so we're going to be fighting this, even though I'm running for Congress. I'm still working for CoLab, and I still live here. And so we're going to put a lot of effort. That's why we had this Zoom conference, is this has to be defeated. But the fact is, mom and pop businesses, many of them work for a paycheck, not a profit. And their asset is that building. And so they could lose everything they have, their income and their savings, if we don't defeat this thing.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. So we'll be fighting. And again, we've got, we're in the midst of our campaign radio ads. I have a great radio producer. So we have, I think we're loaded for this one. And I think we'll be ready, Andy.
Good. So Karen Sanders asked the question, what name or organization are the videos? They're on our campaign website, andycaldwell2020.com, andycaldwell2020.com. And then also our YouTube channel is, I think it's just Andy Caldwell for Congress. If you Google that on YouTube, you'll find it as well. Jon, I want to thank you for being with us. You've been a tireless advocate. I always talk about, you know, I have a job as a local government watchdog, but I can't imagine you being in the trenches up there since the 90s in Sacramento. And we just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts and our wallet books.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care, everybody.